So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We were supposed to be the three of us on a fireside chat, and Udit unfortunately was not able to make it because he was not keeping too well. So instead of a fireside chat, we thought we are going to have more of a conversation at this point of time. And clearly, the task in front of us was about data, about how organizations sift through big data, and also how to personalize at scale for brands. Um, we had a quick conversation backstage as well, and we're quite excited to share a few insights. Also, I'm just going to give a quick introduction of Dhruv. And Dhruv actually is the founder of HaikuJAM. HaikuJAM is a platform where 1 million strangers come together to co-create poetry. And clearly, he's on top of a lot of data. He is analyzing and he is seeing a lot of trends. And there are a few thoughts that come to my head, when clearly he comes from a tech and entrepreneurial background. So yeah, my first question to Dhruv would be that, when is it that he started introducing data science into into business? How at what point of time was it important? At what level of data is big really big enough?
Thanks, Om. So I think that's a really solid question. Maybe before I get straight to that, I can just give a little bit more context on HaikuJAM, and then, because I think this stuff is really, really context-specific, right? There's no one-size-fits-all solution. There's no one right approach. I think generally, the way that companies navigate data, the way that founders build products, it's extremely personal. It's pretty intimate, and it's, I think, reflective of your underlying philosophy and what you're actually trying to do and achieve in the world. So I think in HaikuJAM's context, like Saul mentioned, we've built it's a social writing game called HaikuJAM. It's a mobile app on Android, and you can check it out, where you write with other people all around the world. There's 1 million people now. There's been almost 80, 90 million lines that have been published in the platform, and you can write about anything. It could have been your morning coffee. It could be something that Donald Trump said yesterday. And what's really interesting is that the whole process is collaborative. So you will write a line, send it out, and then someone in South Korea, it could be a school teacher, she will pick it up, she will write the next line, then she will send that line to someone else. It could be a doctor in San Francisco. So not only are you unleashing your creativity, being creative, but you're also connecting to new people in a really, really magical way, right? So that's the product. And as I mentioned now, it's been a few years since we've launched this app. Just about to hit 1 million users, 80 million lines published. Every single second, there's almost 3 lines that are published in the platform. So there's this really fast-moving, fascinating corpus of content that we're seeing, happening in the platform. So now to answer your question, I feel that when we launched the product, it took a while just to get on top of how to do basic level analytics, right? How you actually optimize a mobile funnel. How do you use data and understand what is going on? And then the last 1.5 years, we have been shifting from just purely doing analytics to actually data science, and very specifically natural language processing and artificial intelligence, so that we can actually go beyond structured data, beyond clicks and what people are doing in the app, and actually unearthing interesting insight from the content that people are writing about. If we think about the atomic unit of content in HaikuJAM, it's the collaborative poem, right? It's a 3-line poem written by 3 different strangers, and it has about anything between 10 and 15 words. Now, on face value, that may not sound that interesting, but when you apply statistical techniques to analyzing that individual poem, and especially all the poems at scale, it's really, really fascinating. The kind of things that you find out. In fact, we're going to talk more about this in terms of how we're using it in a business context now. But just last week, you may have seen that Ben & Jerry's launched a partnership with Netflix, right? They're launching a new range, I think, of vegan ice creams called Netflix and Chilled. Now, what's really interesting is that was announced last week, but in November 2018, we crawled, I think it was around 40,000 lines of poetry in HaikuJAM that was talking about ice cream. And the most discussed brand was Netflix, right? So a year and a half ago, we figured out there's this really deep and intimate link between Netflix and ice cream. And now, right, that has actually become a really exciting partnership that's touching millions of consumers around the US and Europe. So I think, just to give a
So when you are actually analyzing such large amounts of data, how do you sift through the noise? Because there are times where you have to take qualitative calls as a marketer as well. It's not only about quantity. We know that there's enough and more technology out there that can actually sift through quantitative data, and it's largely provided to us by a lot of ad tech platforms and a lot of analytics firms. But where do you draw a line and say that, okay, enough of the math, this is where I get intuition and art into my data as well?
I wouldn't even say it's like drawing a line. I think even before people start talking and thinking about data, you should probably just close your eyes and take a deep breath, right? Because we all know that there's so much of it that's exponentially increasing, and you can just feel out of breath trying to figure out what it means, what you can do with it. And I feel that when we look at most branded content just sucks, right? It's just useless. It doesn't actually create any kind of emotional connection. It's super transactional, and it feels like a lot of agencies and brands today are just going through the motions of having an Instagram page and posting 3 times a day just because that seems to be what everyone else is doing. We were just discussing this backstage. I think just a much more holistic approach to what you're doing is really important. So for instance, if as a human being, if you're an introverted person, you're probably not going to go to a party 7 nights a week, right? It's just not what you want to do. That's not who you are. That's not how you want to spend your leisure time. So why does that not apply in the context of brands? If you're a brand that's a little bit calmer, a little bit low-key, a little bit introverted, why do you feel the need to be on TikTok and posting like 10 times a day? The platform is just completely out of sync with who you fundamentally are, and yet you're deploying millions of dollars to try and make it work for you. So I think before even drawing a line, it's just asking yourself that question: who am I? What are we doing this for? Where are those people? And then going from there. And then of course I think that's when you
So the takeaway here is that you really understand your business well, what are your business objectives, and then use data to drive your business objectives. And I would say this on behalf of a lot of marketers in the room as well, that one of the primary reasons we also use data is to gain a competitive advantage over certain brands in our categories. And I've seen that because I interact with a whole lot of marketers from various industries. There are certain industries that still rely on intuition. There are some industries that have very good data stacks at their behest. And while most of them advertise on similar ad tech platforms, there's no major differentiation. They're all reaching out to the same set of audiences because that's what platforms are offering them, whether it's Google, Facebook. They have the same set of targeting parameters, same set of how important does it become for one to kind of mine their own first-party data, gain insights out of that, utilize that, or also to go beyond first-party data? Have you kind of taken any measures to go beyond your own data, or create any AI or technology that mines data to get more like the matchmaking technology that you spoke of? Maybe you want to kind of address that?
Yeah, so I think to unpack that a little bit, of course, there is data that is created, let's say, inside of your business, right? In your first-degree interactions with your customers and users. And there's a lot of peripheral data, right, that exists, let's say, outside of your business, social media conversations, things that your competitors are doing. And absolutely, I think it's good practice to stay on top of both and try and make sense of both. And it's important too as well, because there could be a new opportunity that isn't being surfaced within your community right now that you could be learning from another community. And in fact, if you think generally about any game-changing leaps or real innovation, it happens it happens because of cross-fertilization of ideas and at the edge of disciplines, right? Random story I just remembered was like how the iMac, right? I think that Johnny Ive, the designer at Apple, when he was designing the iMac and he was thinking about the stand, right? How that stand needs to look and feel. He wanted it to be really almost invisible, right? All the user attention should be on the display. And he just wasn't able to figure out this design problem. And he was sat with like Steve Jobs in a garden one day and he saw a sunflower. And he noticed how like a sunflower's head is enormous, it's glorious, and that's where your attention is driven. And its stalk is actually quite thin. And that's when he understood that, wow, that, we could learn from that and apply that same design principle to the iMac. So of course, like computers and let's say botany, these are two very, very different worlds, but he found a way to bridge those things together. I think the same applies to the way that companies and entrepreneurs and marketers approach data as well.
So you basically, you could use data to build a lot of associations per se. So at an agency level, what we've seen is, for instance, for one of our brands, and it's a leading fast food chain across India, and what happens is that people who spend time on that particular site are also into smoking cessation. These are people who are consuming fast food, and there's a direct link between these guys wanting to drop out of nicotine as a habit. So we start creating content for these kind of audiences as well. And clearly, because it's an ethical way, we can build our brand into the conversation. Anything, any kind of trends that you've seen that you could not kind of, think of, or something that the platform says post you have applied data science to it, something that would miss the eye?
So I think I'm going to give a quick demo of the product after this, so I'll save some of the things for then. But I think the example that I just shared is a really good one around Netflix, right? I think now intuitively, when you understand that, okay, Netflix plus ice cream, that makes sense, right? People are like binging on Netflix shows, they're eating ice cream at night. But a year and a half ago, if you were, let's say, an ice cream company having an internal brainstorm and you felt, what are the top brands associated with ice cream as a category right now? Would Netflix have really entered that conversation? Probably not, right? You'd be thinking about the usual suspects, Baskin-Robbins, Ben & Jerry's, Haagen-Dazs. So that's just an example of how that, through data science, through natural language processing, we were able to identify very creative associations that, seems coming from a space of someone's subconscious as opposed to someone's conscious mind.
There's, considering, again, so many marketers in the room, there's one point I'd like to address is marketing myopia over here. We are very used to kind of just sourcing data from the platforms that are readily available to us, thereby not really moving out and exploring newer platforms or newer sources of data. And very subconsciously for a marketer, the ad tech platforms become your primary source of data, and you try to keep mining that data over time. So I would just urge people to go out, look at government registration. Very recently, in one of our campaigns, we actually tied up with Niti Aayog, and we got a lot of data from them, and we kind of understood the groundwater levels in India. And what actually happened is that one of our clients who's into bedsheet manufacturing, and they make bedsheets that save water, and they utilize almost 40% less water. And what we did was that we created context using this data by creating different sets of communication where the groundwater levels were low. We actually told people that, guys, this is a red alert. The water levels in your city or your location are really low, and you can possibly save this by going for these bed sheets. And where it was high, we asked them to kind of be part of a cause where they're actually saving water. And using such data and adding this layer of data on top of the ad tech platforms, the data that you already get from ad tech platforms, actually helped us build a lot of context and drove a lot of competitive advantage for the brand as well. I mean, technically, where you see a click-through rate of 0.5, we started getting CTRs of almost 1.5 to 2%. That was just by building context. So do you think a lot of marketers also miss context and are only focused on pure personalization?
Are we out of time? I'll just sum up then a final thought. I think I think there's a lot of marketers and teams in the world who have the right product and are telling completely the wrong story. Or they have the right product and the right story, but they're telling it in completely the wrong way. And because of that, there's enormous amount of waste and inefficiency. And using tools like the one that we are building internally right now and other alternative data sets and just being more holistic about how you approach data, artificial intelligence, you're just going to help people make much more conscious decisions and unlock lots and lots of value that they can't even perhaps see right now. That's just within, that's bubbling under the surface. So yeah, that's a final thought.